The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Representatives from 47 different species sat in perfect silence as General Krex II of the Kethvar Empire finished his announcement. His massive form towered over the speaking platform. His four arms spread wide as he declared his people's intention to claim the Sol system and bring the primitive humans under Kethvar rule. The humans have had enough time to develop, Krex II said, his voice echoing through the chamber. They still crawl around their single world like insects. They have barely reached their own moon. It is time for a superior race to guide them toward proper civilization. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The Kethvar Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past 100 years. No one had ever successfully stood against their war machine. Their plasma weapons could turn mountains into glass, and their shields could withstand the fury of entire suns. Ambassador Zarathek, of the Veltari, had remained silent during the general's speech. Now she rose slowly from her seat, her ancient form moving with careful dignity. The Veltari were old, perhaps the oldest species in the known galaxy. They had seen empires rise and fall for thousands of years. When Zarathek spoke, others listened. General Krex II, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. I must speak against this action. Krex II turned to face her, his red eyes glowing with amusement. Honored Ambassador, surely you do not fear for these primitive humans? They have no real weapons, no faster-than-light travel, no energy shields. My smallest warship could destroy their entire space program in minutes. Zarathek moved to the center of the hall. Her silver robes rustled as she walked, and every eye followed her. She had served as an ambassador for over 300 years. No one had ever seen her show such concern before. General, you are making a terrible mistake, she said. I have met these humans. I have seen what they are capable of. If you attack them, they will destroy your empire. Laughter erupted from the Kethvar delegation. Several other species joined in. The idea was absurd. The humans had been observed for 50 years. They were barely capable of reaching their own planet's orbit. How could such a primitive species threaten the mighty Kethvar Empire? Please, Zarathek continued, raising her hand for silence. Let me tell you what happened 50 years ago, when my people first encountered the humans. The hall grew quiet again. Even those who had been laughing wanted to hear this story. We had a research station in the Outer Rim, studying the formation of new stars, Zarathek began. It was a peaceful mission. 20 of our best scientists were working there when the pirates attacked. She paused, her old eyes distant with memory. The Black Fang pirates had 5 warships. Each one was larger and better armed than anything the humans possessed at that time. They demanded our research data and threatened to kill all of our people if we refused. General Krex II crossed his arms. And what does this have to do with the humans, Ambassador? A human exploration vessel detected our distress signal, Zarathek said. One ship. A tiny thing, barely large enough to carry 20 people. It had simple chemical engines and primitive kinetic weapons. By any reasonable measure, it should have fled immediately. The ambassador walked closer to the Kethvar delegation. Instead, Captain Maria Santos ordered her ship to attack. 1 human vessel against 5 pirate warships. The logical thing to do would have been to call for help and wait, but humans do not think logically when others are in danger. She stopped directly in front of Krex II. That single human ship fought like nothing I had ever seen. They used their ship's engines as weapons. Ramming 1 pirate vessel at full speed, they turned their cargo bay into a missile launcher, firing metal containers filled with explosives. When their main weapons were destroyed, they continued fighting with emergency flares and handheld weapons. The hall was completely silent now. Everyone was listening. Captain Santos was injured in the first exchange of fire. Zarathek continued. Her ship's hull was breached in 7 places. Her life support was failing. Any sane being would have surrendered or retreated. Instead, she continued fighting. Zarathek's voice grew stronger. She rammed her ship into the pirate flagship. The explosion destroyed both vessels, but it gave my people time to escape. When we found Captain Santos floating in space, she was unconscious and bleeding from dozens of wounds. The first thing she asked when she woke up was whether all of our scientists were safe. General Krex II shifted uncomfortably. A single incident does not. It was not a single incident, Zarathek interrupted. In the 50 years since then, we have observed the humans carefully. We have watched them fight wars among themselves, with an intensity that frightened us. We have seen them survive disasters that would have destroyed other species. We have witnessed their capacity for both creation and destruction. She turned to address the entire assembly. You see their primitive technology and think they are weak. You are wrong. Technology is just tools. What matters is the mind that uses those tools, and the will that drives that mind. The humans possess something that no other species in this galaxy has. And what is that? Asked Chancellor Mortex of the hegemony. They refuse to accept defeat, Zarathek said simply. When faced with impossible odds, they do not surrender. They adapt. They learn. They become more dangerous. Every challenge makes them stronger. She looked directly at General Krex II. If you attack their world, you will not be fighting a primitive species defending their planet. You will be facing a race of beings who consider death preferable to slavery. They will use weapons you cannot imagine, employ tactics you have never seen, and fight with a determination that will terrify your soldiers. Krex II straightened to his full height. Ambassador, I respect your age and wisdom, but you overestimate these humans. My empire has conquered species far more advanced than them. Our victory will be swift and complete. Zarathek shook her head sadly. General, I have tried to warn you. The humans have spent their entire history fighting impossible wars and winning them. They have survived ice ages that would have frozen other species to death. They have endured plagues that should have wiped them out. They have fought wars that should have destroyed their civilization, and emerged stronger. She walked back toward her seat, then turned for one final warning. You mistake their current capabilities for their potential. You see their small ships and primitive weapons, but you do not see their minds working, planning, preparing. Humans do not simply fight wars, General Krex II. They become war itself. They will turn your own strength against you, use your victories to defeat you, and make your empire's size into its greatest weakness. Her voice echoed through the silent hall. Turn away from this path, General. Choose a different target. Leave the humans alone, or your empire will burn until nothing remains but ashes and regret. General Krex II stood silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a harsh sound that rang through the chamber. Thank you for your concern, Ambassador, he said. But the Kethvar Empire does not fear bedtime stories about primitive humans. Our conquest of the Sol system will begin within one standard month. Zarathek sat down heavily, her shoulders slumped with defeat. She had tried to save them. Now she could only wait and watch as another empire learned the hardest lesson in the galaxy. Never underestimate humanity. Admiral Vekmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Times Dominion Asterisk, watching the small yellow star grow larger on the main screen. Sol's system looked exactly as their intelligence reports had described. One habitable world, a few rocky planets, and various debris floating in the void. Nothing impressive. Nothing threatening, Admiral, reported his tactical officer. We are now 12 hours from the human homeworld. Long-range sensors confirm their technology levels are as expected. Chemical rockets, primitive nuclear energy, basic radio communications. Vekmore nodded with satisfaction. He commanded 12 of the Empire's finest warships. Each vessel was over 2 kilometers long, armed with plasma cannons that could melt through solid rock, and protected by energy shields that had never been breached by enemy fire. The humans had nothing that could even scratch his ship's hulls. Any response to our arrival? He asked. Negative, sir. They seem unaware of our presence. That was disappointing but not surprising. Human technology was so primitive, they probably could not detect ships at this distance. Vekmore had hoped for at least some acknowledgement of his fleet's superiority. Half the pleasure of conquest came from seeing the fear in his enemy's eyes. Take us closer, he ordered. Enter the outer system and transmit our demands. The Kethvar fleet moved forward at a leisurely pace. There was no need for hurry. The humans had nowhere to run and nothing to fight with. This would be the easiest conquest in the Empire's history. When they reached the edge of the system, Vecmore's communications officer activated the transmission array. The message was simple and had been used successfully on 16 previous worlds. Surrender immediately, or face total destruction. This is Admiral Vecmore of the Kethvar Empire, he announced, his voice carrying across space toward the small blue world ahead. Your system is now under Imperial control. Surrender your government and military forces immediately. You have 6 standard hours to comply. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. Vecmore settled back in his command chair to wait. Most species surrendered within the first hour. A few tried to negotiate. Only the very foolish attempted to fight. And those conflicts never lasted long. 3 hours passed before the humans responded. Vecmore was beginning to think they might be too primitive to even understand his message when his communications officer looked up in surprise. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. Put it through. The main screen flickered and showed a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. She was young by human standards, with short dark hair and intense brown eyes. Behind her, Vecmore could see what looked like a command center with dozens of humans working at primitive computer terminals. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force, the human said. Her voice was calm and steady, showing no signs of the fear Vecmore expected. Your demands are rejected. Leave our system immediately, or face the consequences. Vecmore stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. The other Kethvar on the bridge joined in. The idea of this tiny human threatening them was absurd. Admiral Chen, he said when he stopped laughing, I do not think you understand your situation. Your entire planet has no weapons capable of harming my ships. Your largest warship mass is 1/10 of my smallest escort vessel. You cannot possibly. The transmission cut off abruptly. Vecmore frowned and gestured to his communications officer. But before the connection could be restored, his tactical officer called out in alarm. Admiral, multiple contacts approaching from the inner system. The main screen switched to tactical display. 30 red dots were moving toward them at high speed, emerging from behind the human homeworld like a swarm of angry insects. Human warships, reported the tactical officer. They are moving in attack formation. Vecmore studied the display with amusement. The human ships were laughably small compared to his fleet. Each one was maybe 300 meters long, barely large enough to be considered a real warship. They had no visible energy shields and no obvious weapon ports. They intend to attack us, he said with genuine surprise. These primitives actually think they can fight the Imperial Navy. His tactical officer looked nervous. Sir, their formation is unusual. They are not positioning themselves defensively around their planet. They are trying to surround us. Vecmore looked more carefully at the tactical display. The human ships were indeed spreading out in an envelopment pattern, as if they intended to trap his superior force. It was either incredibly brave or completely insane. Sir, called out his sensor operator, I am detecting unusual energy readings from the human vessels. Their power signatures are much higher than expected for their size. Impossible, Vecmore replied. Their technology level cannot support high-energy weapons systems. The human fleet continued closing the distance. When they reached weapons range, Vecmore decided to demonstrate the futility of resistance. He selected the nearest asteroid and fired a single plasma cannon. The asteroid, roughly the size of a human city, vaporized instantly in a brilliant flash of green light. There, he said with satisfaction. Now they understand what they face. Signal the human fleet to surrender immediately. The rest of his sentence was lost in alarms as every human ship opened fire simultaneously. Vecmore's world exploded into chaos. Weapons that should not exist tore through space toward his fleet. Kinetic projectiles moving at incredible speeds smashed into his ship's shields. Missiles that maneuvered like living creatures dodged his point defense systems. Energy beams cut through his supposedly impenetrable armor, like it was made of paper. The Kethvar cruiser times Vengeance times took a direct hit from something that looked like a simple metal rod but struck with the force of a small meteor. The ship's shields collapsed instantly, and its hull cracked open like an egg. "How are they doing this?" Vecmore shouted over the noise of battle alerts. "Their technology is primitive." His tactical officer was frantically working his controls. "Sir, their weapons are unlike anything in our databases. Those kinetic projectiles are moving at significant fractions of light speed. Their missiles are using guidance systems more advanced than our own." Another Kethvar ship, the Destroyer times Conquest Asterisk, disappeared in a brilliant explosion as multiple human weapons converged on it. The humans were not fighting like any species Vecmore had ever encountered. They showed no hesitation, no fear, no attempt at self-preservation. Every ship attacked as if victory was more important than survival. "All ships, retreat to safe distance," Vecmore commanded. Emergency jump to system edge. As his battered fleet pulled back, Vecmore stared at the tactical display in shock. 3 of his warships were gone. 3 ships that had conquered entire worlds, destroyed by primitive humans in less than 5 minutes of combat. "Sir," his sensor operator reported, his voice shaking, "I am detecting massive energy signatures throughout the inner system. There are structures hidden in the asteroid belt, installations on multiple moons, and what appears to be a major industrial complex in orbit around the 4th planet." Vecmore felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "Show me." The main screen displayed a detailed scan of the Sol system. What they had thought was empty space was actually filled with hidden installations. Weapons, platforms, disguised as mining stations, shipyards built inside hollowed-out asteroids, manufacturing facilities that rivaled the Empire's greatest industrial centers. "How long have they been building all this?" he whispered. His intelligence officer checked his readings twice before answering. "Based on the energy signatures and construction patterns, sir, I estimate at least 50 years. Possibly longer. 50 years. The humans had been preparing for this day for 50 years, while the Kethvar Empire had been conquering other worlds, assuming humanity was too primitive to notice or care. The humans had been watching, learning, and building a war machine." Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral Vecmore, this is your final warning. You have 10 minutes to leave our system. Any Kethvar vessel remaining after that time will be destroyed." Vecmore looked at his tactical display. The 30 human ships that had attacked them were now joined by dozens more, emerging from hidden bases throughout the system. Each new contact revealed weapons and capabilities that should not exist. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "what are your orders?" Vecmore stared at the growing number of human ships on his screen. The old Veltari ambassador's words echoed in his memory. "You mistake their current capabilities for their potential." 1. Veltari Ambassadors 1. Veltari Ambassadors 1. They had been watching. The humans had been watching and preparing and planning for this exact moment. Everything they had shown, the galaxy, the primitive rockets, the simple space stations, the basic technology, it had all been a mask, hiding something far more dangerous. "Set course for the system edge," he ordered. "Signal the Empire. Tell them we need reinforcements." "How many ships, sir?" Vecmore watched as more human vessels appeared on his sensors, each one revealing new weapons and capabilities that defied everything the Empire thought it knew about human technology. "All of them," he said. "Send everything we have." As his fleet retreated toward the edge of the system, Vecmore realized he had made the same mistake that 16 other species had made when facing the Kethvar Empire. He had assumed that what he could see was all there was. The humans had let him see exactly what they wanted him to see. And now he understood that everything, absolutely everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity was wrong. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the command center deep beneath the lunar surface, watching dozens of screens that showed the retreating Kethvar fleet. Around her, hundreds of technicians coordinated humanity's response to the first act of galactic aggression against Earth. The room hummed with quiet efficiency. Every person focused on their assigned tasks. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Park, "all hidden installations are coming online. Asteroid bases, Lunar facilities and orbital platforms are reporting ready status. Sarah nodded. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Since the first intercepted alien transmission in 2157, Earth's governments had known they were not alone in the universe. More importantly, they had learned that the universe was not a peaceful place. Communications, open a channel to Admiral Vekmore, she ordered. The main screen flickered to show the Kethvar commander's face. He looked shaken and confused. Nothing like the confident conqueror who had demanded Earth's surrender just hours earlier. Admiral Vekmore, Sarah said with a cold smile. I thought you might want to know what you're really facing. She gestured to her tactical officer, who began transmitting detailed scans of the Sol system to the Kethvar fleet. Every hidden base, every concealed weapons platform, every secret installation that humanity had built over the past 5 decades. You see, Admiral, we've been listening to your Empire's communications for a very long time. We know about every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every tactic you've used. We've studied your technology, analyzed your strategies, and prepared for the day you would come for us. Vekmore stared at the tactical data streaming across his screens. The Sol system was not the primitive backwater he had expected. It was a fortress, bristling with weapons and defenses that had been hidden in plain sight. Impossible, he whispered. Our intelligence reports said you were primitive. You have barely reached your own moon. Sarah laughed, a sound with no humor in it. We let you see exactly what we wanted you to see. Did you really think a species that survived ice ages, global wars, and planetary plagues would be unprepared for hostile aliens? She walked closer to the camera, her expression growing serious. Admiral, you made the mistake of assuming that our current public technology represents our actual capabilities. While your empire was busy conquering defenseless worlds, we were building the most advanced war machine the galaxy has ever seen. The tactical display updated again, showing the true scale of human military infrastructure. Massive shipyards hidden inside hollowed asteroids. Weapons platforms disguised as scientific research stations. Manufacturing complexes that could produce warships faster than the Kethvar Empire's greatest facilities. For 50 years, we've been watching and learning, Sarah continued. Every time your empire conquered another world, we studied how you did it. Every time your ships fought pirates or rebels, we analyzed their performance. You showed us your strengths, Admiral. But more importantly, you showed us your weaknesses. Lieutenant Commander Park stepped forward. Ma'am, long-range sensors are detecting Kethvar reinforcement fleets approaching from 3 different vectors. Estimated arrival time, 72 hours. Sarah smiled grimly. Right on schedule. Admiral Vekmore, are you watching your sensor readings? You should be detecting some interesting energy signatures right about now. On his flagship, Vekmore's sensor operator was indeed reporting something extraordinary. Sir, massive hyperspace signatures detected throughout known space. Ships are emerging from faster-than-light travel in multiple systems simultaneously. Our ships? Vekmore asked hopefully. No, sir. Unknown design. Configuration matches no known species in our databases. Sarah's voice crackled across the communication channel. Those would be ours, Admiral. Did you think we were sitting quietly on Earth all these years? We've been exploring the galaxy for decades, moving slowly and carefully, always staying hidden. Generation ships, launched back when your empire thought we were playing with fire and stone tools. The sensor operator's voice grew more alarmed. Sir, I count at least 200 vessels emerging from hyperspace jumps. They are taking positions around Kethvar military installations throughout the outer territories. How? Vekmore demanded. You don't have faster-than-light travel. Our intelligence confirmed this. We don't. Sarah agreed. Those ships left Earth 30, 40, even 50 years ago, traveling at high percentages of light speed. They've been moving through dark space, following courses calculated to arrive at precise moments during a conflict we knew would eventually come. She paused to let that sink in. Admiral, humanity has been preparing for a galactic war since before your current emperor was born. We've been planning for this conversation since before you received your first command. Vecmore felt the blood drain from his face. You've been planning this for 50 years? Longer, Sarah replied. We started preparing the moment we detected alien radio transmissions. We knew that any species advanced enough to communicate across interstellar distances would eventually notice us. We also knew that peaceful contact was not guaranteed. If Uzal, the tactical display on Vecmore's bridge updated again, showing the positions of human ships throughout Kethvar space. They were perfectly positioned to attack supply lines, communication relays, and industrial facilities. It was the work of decades of planning and preparation. Every first contact scenario was war-gamed, Sarah continued. Every possible enemy was studied. We prepared for trade, for diplomacy, for peaceful cooperation. But we also prepared for you, Admiral. We prepared for conquest, for slavery, for genocide. And we decided that none of those things would happen to humanity. She walked back to her command chair, her voice growing harder. You want to know the truth about humans, Admiral? We are not primitive. We are not defenseless. We are the result of 4 billion years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages that buried continents. We endured plagues that killed half our population. We fought world wars with weapons that could have destroyed our entire civilization. The communication channel filled with reports from across Kethvar space. Human ships were appearing everywhere, attacking with weapons and tactics that defied imperial military doctrine. They used asteroids as kinetic weapons, turned stars into strategic obstacles, and employed psychological warfare that broke the minds of Kethvar commanders. But Admiral, Sarah said, her voice now carrying a note of genuine sadness, we also learned something else during those thousands of years of war and survival. We learned that the strongest species is not the one with the best weapons or the largest empire. It's the one that can adapt, that can change, that can learn from every defeat, and become stronger. She leaned forward, staring directly into the camera. Your empire has been fighting the same way for centuries. You use overwhelming force, superior technology, and fear to conquer primitive worlds. You've never faced an enemy that could match your technology and exceed your determination. Reports continued flowing in from across the galaxy. Kethvar supply convoys were being destroyed. Communication networks were being jammed. Industrial worlds were under assault by forces that seemed to know every weakness in their defenses. Admiral Vecmore, Sarah said quietly, you asked how we were doing this with primitive technology. The answer is simple. We stopped being primitive the moment we decided to survive. Everything else was just acting. Alder. Alder. There's another fender. Alder. 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 The main screen showed real-time feeds from across Kethvar space. Human ships moved with precision and purpose, executing plans that had been developed over decades. Each attack was coordinated with dozens of others, creating a campaign of systematic destruction that was crippling the Empire's ability to respond. Your reinforcement fleets will arrive in 72 hours, Sarah noted, checking her displays. By then, half your Empire's infrastructure will be gone. Your supply lines will be cut. Your communication networks will be dark, and your subject species will be armed with human weapons and human tactics. She stood up, her expression grim but determined. This is your last chance, Admiral. Order all Kethvar forces to withdraw from human space and cease all military operations. Agree to a ceasefire and negotiations for the surrender of your empire. Vecmore stared at her in disbelief. Surrender? You want my empire to surrender? No, Admiral, Sarah replied. I want your empire to survive. Because if you choose to continue this fight, if your reinforcement fleets attack our system, then we will demonstrate what total war really means. She gestured to her tactical officer, who displayed a new set of readings on Vecmore's screen. Energy signatures from across the galaxy, all of them massive, all of them previously hidden. Those are our deep space installations. Admiral. Weapons platforms that have been building and waiting for 50 years. Each one is capable of sterilizing entire star systems. We built them not because we wanted to use them, but because we knew that someday we might have to. The communication channel fell silent as Vecmore absorbed the scope of what he was seeing. Humanity had not just prepared for war, they had prepared for total, absolute, galactic war. The choice is yours, Admiral, Sarah said quietly. Withdraw now, and your empire might survive in some form. Continue this fight, and we will reduce it to ashes. She cut the transmission, leaving Vecmore alone with the terrible knowledge of what his empire had awakened. General Krex II stood in the war room, aboard the Super Dreadnought Times Imperial Might *, watching as red lights filled the galactic display. Each light represented a Kethvar installation under attack, a supply line cut, or a communication relay destroyed. In just 72 hours, the humans had crippled operations across half the empire. Status report, he demanded. Admiral Thekvar, his military commander, looked exhausted. General, we have lost contact with 17 military bases, 43 supply depots, and 12 major industrial worlds. The humans are striking everywhere simultaneously. Krex II studied the tactical display with growing disbelief. The human attacks showed a level of coordination that should have been impossible. They were hitting targets across thousands of light-years with perfect timing, as if they had been planning each strike for years. How many ships have we lost? Unknown, sir. Communications are so badly disrupted, we cannot get accurate reports. Conservative estimates place our losses at over 200 warships. 200 ships. The Empire had lost more vessels in 3 days than in the previous 50 years of conquest. And they were fighting an enemy that supposedly had no faster-than-light travel. Sir, interrupted the intelligence officer, we have a transmission from Admiral Vecmore's fleet. Put it through. Vecmore's image appeared on the main screen. His uniform was disheveled, and his command bridge showed clear signs of recent combat damage. General, the humans have rejected our offer to negotiate. They are demanding complete surrender of all Imperial forces. Unacceptable, Krex II growled. We are the Kethvar Empire. We do not surrender to primitives. General, these are not primitives. They have weapons we cannot counter, tactics we cannot predict, and resources we never suspected. They have been preparing for this war for 50 years. Krex II turned away from the screen. 50 years of preparation. While the Empire had been focused on easy conquests, the humans had been studying, planning, and building. But the Empire was still stronger. They had 500 warships, enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. Admiral Vecmore, you will remain in the Sol system and prevent human reinforcements from reaching other theaters. I am bringing the full Imperial fleet to crush this human uprising once and for all. Vecmore looked worried. Sir, I strongly advise caution. The humans do not fight like any enemy we have faced. They use tactics that... Enough. Krex II cut the transmission. Fear was spreading through his commanders like a disease. It was time to remind everyone why the Kethvar Empire ruled the galaxy. Within hours, the largest military fleet in galactic history was moving toward human space. 500 warships, each one capable of destroying worlds. The combined firepower could sterilize every planet in a dozen star systems. But as they traveled, reports continued to arrive that made no sense. Human ships were appearing in locations they had never been detected before. Kethvar worlds were falling not to invasion fleets, but to internal revolt. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were suddenly armed with advanced weapons and fighting with desperate courage. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we are receiving disturbing reports from the Heath homeworld. The slave population has risen in rebellion. They appear to be armed with human weapons. Krex II frowned. How did humans get weapons to Heath Prime? That system is 300 light-years from Earth. Unknown, sir. But the rebels are using tactics and equipment that match human military doctrine. More reports flooded in. On Gorthek, the mining slaves had seized control of the planet's industrial facilities. On Veklos, the agricultural workers had overwhelmed their Kethvar overseers, using human-designed explosives. On Ralthan, an entire Imperial garrison had been destroyed by former slaves using human battle tactics. "General," Admiral Thekvar said quietly, "I am beginning to understand their strategy. They are not trying to conquer our worlds. They are liberating them." Krex II stared at the tactical display as the pattern became clear. The humans were not fighting a conventional war of conquest. They were turning the Empire's greatest strength, its vast collection of enslaved worlds, into its greatest weakness. "Sir, transmission from Heath Prime." The screen showed a face Krex II had never seen before. A human female, young and determined, standing in what looked like a Kethvar command center. Behind her, Heath slaves were operating Imperial equipment with obvious expertise. "General Krex II," she said. "I am Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the Human Liberation Corps. As of this moment, Heath Prime is no longer part of your empire. The Heath people are free." "Impossible," Krex II roared. "You cannot have reached Heath Prime. You have no faster-than-light travel." Captain Rodriguez smiled. "You're right, General. We don't. I've been on Heath Prime for 15 years, living among the slaves, learning their culture, teaching them our ways. My ship arrived here in a generation vessel that left Earth 30 years ago." She gestured to the Heath behind her. "These people have been waiting for freedom for 3 centuries. All they needed was someone to show them how to fight. Humans are very good teachers, General." The transmission ended, leaving Krex II staring at a blank screen. 15 years. Human agents had been living undercover in his empire for 15 years. Preparing for this moment, "Sir, we have similar reports from 12 other worlds," Admiral Thekvar reported. "Human liberation advisors are emerging from slave populations across the empire. They have been organizing resistance cells and stockpiling weapons for years." Krex II felt the ground shifting beneath him. This was not a war between two empires. This was a revolution, guided and supported by humans who had infiltrated his territories decades ago. "How many of our subject species are in revolt?" "Unknown, sir. Communications are too disrupted to get accurate counts, but the rebellions appear to be coordinated and well supplied." On the tactical display, red warning lights continued to multiply. Entire sectors were going dark as former slaves took control of Imperial facilities. The humans were not conquering the Kethvar Empire, they were dissolving it from within. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving an urgent transmission from the capital world." Emperor Vorthok appeared on screen, his golden robes replaced by battle armor. The Imperial Palace was clearly under siege, with explosions visible through the windows behind him. "General Krex II," the Emperor said, his voice strained. "The capital is under attack. Some of our own subject species have joined the rebellion. They have weapons and tactics that match human technology. How is this possible?" Before Krex II could answer, another voice interrupted. A human voice, speaking perfect Imperial standard. "Your Majesty," the voice said, "this is Commander James Park of the Human Liberation Corps. For 20 years, I have lived on your capital world, working in your factories, learning your weaknesses. Today, the Empire ends." The transmission cut to static. Krex II stared at the dead screen, understanding finally settling over him like a cold weight. The humans had not been preparing for a war against the Kethvar Empire, they had been preparing to destroy it completely. "Sir," Admiral Thekvar said quietly, "what are your orders?" Krex II looked at the tactical display one more time. Red lights covered most of the galaxy now. The empire that had taken centuries to build was collapsing in a matter of days, but they still had their fleet. 500 warships, enough to destroy Earth and end this rebellion before it spread further. "All ships. Maximum speed to the Sol system," he ordered. "We will destroy the human homeworld and end this insurrection." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "I am detecting massive energy signatures ahead. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace." The main screen showed what was waiting for them. 300 human vessels, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything they had seen before. Ships that had been hidden in deep space for decades, waiting for this moment. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force, came a familiar voice. General Krex II, you have entered human space with hostile intent. This is your final warning. Surrender now, or be destroyed. Krex II looked at his fleet of 500 ships, then at the 300 human vessels blocking their path. The numbers favored the Empire. But he had learned not to trust numbers when fighting humans. All ships, attack formation, he ordered. We end this today. The two fleets closed with each other in the darkness between stars. But as the battle began, Krex II realized that the humans had one more surprise waiting for him. Ships began emerging from hyperspace behind the Imperial fleet. Not human ships, but vessels from dozens of different species, Heath warships, Gorthek fighters, Veklos destroyers, and ships from every world the Empire had ever conquered. They were not fighting the humans anymore. They were fighting the entire galaxy, united by a single species that had taught them all the most important lesson in the universe. Freedom was worth any sacrifice. 6 months after the first shot was fired, Ambassador Zarathek walked through the ruins of Keth Prime, the former capital world of the Kethvar Empire. The great towers that had once reached toward the sky lay broken and scattered across the landscape like the bones of some massive beast. But there had been no orbital bombardment here, no weapons of mass destruction. The Kethvar homeworld had fallen to its own former slaves. She made her way to the landing pad where Admiral Sarah Chen was waiting beside a human transport vessel. Around them, construction crews made up of dozens of different species worked to clear debris and build something new from the ashes of the old empire. Ambassador Zarathek, Sarah said, offering a respectful bow. Thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult to witness. The old Veltari looked around at the destruction with sad eyes. I tried to warn them. Admiral, I told General Krex II what would happen if they attacked your world. You did everything you could, Sarah replied. Your people have always been friends to peace. What happened here was not your fault. They walked together toward the ruins of the Imperial Palace, passing groups of former slaves who were dismantling the symbols of Kethvar oppression. Statues of Imperial generals were being pulled down by Heath workers. Gorthek engineers were removing the golden ornaments that had been built with their forced labor. Is it true that you spared all the Kethvar civilians? Zarathek asked. Sarah nodded. We made it clear from the beginning that our fight was with the Empire, not with individuals. Any Kethvar who laid down their weapons and renounced conquest was allowed to live in peace. They stopped at what had once been the Emperor's throne room. Now it served as a coordination center, where representatives from 50 different species worked together to establish new governments on worlds that had been enslaved for centuries. What will happen to them now? Zarathek asked, watching a group of young Kethvar who were helping to distribute supplies to refugee camps. The same thing that happens to everyone else, Sarah said. They will be free to choose their own path. Some will return to their homeworld to build a new society. Others will join the crews of exploration ships or work in the colonies. Freedom means choice, Ambassador, even for former enemies. A young Kethvar approached them, barely old enough to be considered an adult by his species standards. He wore simple work clothes instead of the elaborate uniforms that had marked Imperial citizens. Admiral Chen, he said in heavily accented standard. My name is Yethka. I wanted to thank you for saving my people from themselves. Sarah looked surprised. Saving them? The Empire was killing us, Yethka explained. Not with weapons, but with hatred. We were taught to see other species as property, to value conquest over creation. My generation grew up believing that might made right. If you had not stopped us, we would have destroyed ourselves eventually. He looked around at the mixed groups of beings working together. Now my children will grow up in a galaxy where different species can work together instead of enslaving each other. That is a gift worth more than any empire. After he left, Zarathek and Sarah continued their walk in thoughtful silence. They passed a memorial wall, where the names of those who had died in the liberation were being carved. Human names were mixed with those of Heath, Gorthek, Veklos, and dozens of other species. Admiral, Zarathek said finally, may I ask you something that has been troubling me? Of course. Your species planned this campaign for 50 years. You infiltrated the Empire, prepared weapons, organized resistance movements across hundreds of worlds. The scope of the operation is staggering. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But you could have simply hidden. Your technology was advanced enough to remain undetected. Why did you choose to fight? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching a group of children from different species playing together in a cleared area near the ruined palace. Because hiding would not have protected anyone else, she said finally. The Empire would have continued conquering worlds, enslaving species, destroying cultures. We had the power to stop that from happening, but at such tremendous cost, Zarathek observed. Your people fought and died for the freedom of species they had never met. Ambassador, do you know what we learned during our years of preparation? We studied every species in this galaxy, learned their histories, their cultures, their struggles. We discovered something remarkable. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Every intelligent species, no matter how different from us, values the same basic things: freedom to choose their own path, safety for their children, and the right to exist without fear. She gestured toward the workers around them. These beings were not our enemies. They were prisoners of the same system that threatened us. Fighting for their freedom was fighting for our own. A communication device on Sarah's belt chimed softly. She listened to the brief message and smiled. The last Imperial holdouts on Veklos have surrendered. Admiral Vekmore is requesting permission to meet with us about establishing a new Kethvar government. Zarathek looked surprised. Vekmore? I thought he would fight to the bitter end. People can change, Ambassador. Even former enemies can learn to value peace over conquest. Sarah checked her chronometer. We should head back to the spaceport. The new Galactic Assembly convenes tomorrow. As they walked back toward the landing pad, Zarathek reflected on the changes she had witnessed. 6 months ago, this world had been the center of the most powerful military empire in the galaxy. Now it was becoming a symbol of cooperation and freedom. Admiral, she said, what will humanity do now that the war is over? Will you become the new dominant power in the galaxy? Sarah shook her head firmly. That's exactly what we're trying to prevent. No single species should have the power to control others. The new Galactic Assembly will include representatives from every free world. Decisions will be made by consensus, not by force. And if another aggressive empire rises in the future, then we will face it together. Humanity will share our defensive technology with any peaceful species. We will train others in the tactics that defeated the Kethvar Empire. And we will make sure that every world has the ability to defend itself. They reached the landing pad where several ships were preparing for departure. Representatives from dozens of species were returning to their homeworlds to begin the work of building new societies. Ambassador Vekmore approached them, his bearing very different from the confident Imperial officer who had demanded Earth's surrender. His uniform showed no rank insignia, and his manner was respectful rather than commanding. Admiral Chen, he said, I wanted to speak with you before you depart. Of course, Admiral. I owe you an apology, Vekmore said slowly. And more than that, I owe you my gratitude. When I attacked your world, I believed I was serving a just cause. I thought the Empire brought order to chaos, civilization to primitives. He paused, struggling with words. I was wrong about everything. You were serving what you believed was right, Sarah replied. That's all any of us can do with the knowledge we have. My people want to contribute to the new galaxy you are building. We have military experience that could be used for defense instead of conquest. Engineering skills that could build instead of destroy. Will you let us try to earn redemption? With you well. Sarah extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. Admiral, the future belongs to all of us. Welcome to the free galaxy. Welcome. Sarah, as their ship lifted off from Keth Prime, Zarathek looked down at the world below. Construction was already beginning on new cities that would be designed by freed slaves and former conquerors working together. Admiral, she said, I have one final question. Your species is clearly capable of great destruction. What keeps humanity from becoming the next Kethvar Empire? Sarah followed her gaze to the planet below, where the work of building a better future continued around the clock. Memory, Ambassador. We remember what it feels like to be threatened, to be afraid, to face extinction. We remember what it cost to win this freedom, and we have sworn that no species will ever have to pay that price again. The transport ship turned toward the stars, carrying its passengers toward a galaxy where freedom was no longer just a dream, but a promise kept by beings who understood that true strength lay not in conquest, but in the protection of those who could not protect themselves. In the cargo hold of the ship, carefully preserved in climate-controlled containers, were seeds and genetic samples from Earth gifts that would help dozens of worlds rebuild their ecosystems after centuries of imperial exploitation. It was, perhaps, the most human gesture of all. To respond to devastation not with more destruction, but with the tools to create new life. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun.